Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura. Today I'm talking about Three Assassins, originally titled Grasshopper, but the American translation is called Three Assassins by Kotaro Isaka, released in 2004, and I will be comparing it with the Japanese adaptation Grasshopper, directed by Tomoyoko Takimoto, released in 2015. And in August, I did a Bullet Train bookverse movie, and the Bullet Train movie I liked fairly well. But the book Bullet Train by Kotaro Isaka, fantastic, absolutely loved it. And there was a character in the book who actually was omitted from the movie, but in the book there was a character named Suzuki whose presence felt very important, but I couldn't figure out what his connection was. And I even read the book twice, and the second time around I was still like, man, what's the deal with the Suzuki guy? And I talked about that in my book first movie, and someone commented, or I talked about it in a reading wrap up. Anyway, someone commented being like, Suzuki is actually a character from a prequel of sorts called Grasshopper, and he is the main character in Grasshopper, and that is why his presence is important in Bullet Train. And so I sought out the book Grasshopper, not realizing it was called Three Assassins, so it took me a little while to find it. But once I realized it was republished under the name Three Assassins, I found it and read it, and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it made me love Bullet Train all the more because it gives you more context to Suzuki plus other characters that are mentioned in Bullet Train. It is a prequel to Bullet Train, and yet even so, you could read either one first, and reading both helps you get more context and more appreciation for the two of them. But it's not like I said, you don't need to read one before the other, and they really are two standalone books. But they both have, a colorful cast of unique characters. They have that dark humor. It's like an action comedy. But then it also has moments where there's just a lot of heart and a lot of meaning to it. And Isaka is also incredible at endings, at least as far as these two books go, because I absolutely loved the endings of both of them. And Bullet Train I did like a bit better, but it was published in 2010, so he'd had 6 years to hone his skills a bit more, so it makes sense that Bullet Train ended up being better. But yeah, as with Bullet Train, I had so much fun with this book, and I would highly recommend it. It was more violent than Bullet Train was, and like I said, Bullet Train was maybe a bit more intricate and involved, and I did like it better, but I would still highly recommend Three Assassins, especially if you liked Bullet Train. You should definitely check it out. And before I get into the plot, I want to say there will be spoilers for the book Three Assassins, as well as the movie Grasshopper. There will not be any Bullet Train spoilers, so if you haven't read or watched Bullet Train, no spoilers for that, but I will link to my book first movie for Bullet Train if you want to hear me talk about the plot in depth. But to get into the plot, so in the book and movie, Suzuki is working for a company called Fraulein, and he is a salesman trying to sell women these beauty products. And he knows the business is shady and that they use forceful methods to get women to use these products, and yet he doesn't really care, and he just does it anyway. And the reason he doesn't care is because in the book, his wife, in the movie it's his fiance, but in both she is hit by a car, and he finds out that the person driving the car was Terahara Jr. And Terahara Jr. is the son of Terahara, and Terahara is the leader of this underground organization called Fraulein. And so he decides to infiltrate Fraulein in order to avenge his wife and kill Terahara Jr. And so he doesn't care that their business is shady. He's like, whatever, I'm just doing this to climb the ladder, meet Terahara Jr., and get my revenge. And in the book, he has been working for Fraulein for a month when his superior, Hiyoko, she tells him, we know about your wife. We know you're probably here to get revenge. So if you want to keep working for us and if you want us to trust you, then, because they have these two young people who were interested in the beauty products, and they were just very gullible and very excited about these beauty products. And so they had drugged the two of them. And so she's like, if you want us to trust you, kill these two random strangers and we will trust you. And so she tells him that Terahara Jr. is going to come to watch him and see it done in person. And so he's like, oh, okay, well, instead of killing these two people when Terahara Jr. shows up, I'll just kill him and I'll have my revenge. However, as they are waiting for Terahara Jr., they see him waiting to cross the street, and then he ends up mysteriously falling into traffic, getting hit by a car and dying. And there is a man leaving the scene, and so there is an assassin called the Pusher who kills people by pushing them into traffic. And so Hiyoko is like, follow that man, that's probably the Pusher, go find him. And so Suzuki follows this guy who he assumes is the Pusher, and he follows him to his home, and then he goes back to his home, but then the next day he returns to the home of the Pusher, and he sees that the Pusher has a wife and 2 kids, and he is waiting outside the home when one of the sons comes out and starts talking to him, and so he ends up getting inside the home, and he lies and says he is a test prep instructor, and then eventually the Pusher comes home, and so he just ends up spending the day with this family, trying to figure out if this is in fact the Pusher, and if it is the Pusher, he wants to avenge his dead wife by killing the pusher, I guess, since the pusher ended up taking away his revenge by killing Terahara Jr. before he could. In the book, he found out about Terahara and Fraulein just through his own investigations, but in the movie, he finds out about Fraulein because he is at the intersection where his wife died, and someone gives him a note saying, like, look into the company Fraulein. And so he gets a job for them. Same thing, selling beauty products. And in the movie, there is a girl who is like very interested, and so he and Hiyoko take her back to their headquarters. It seems like he hasn't been working for Fraulein long, like maybe this is even his first day, I'm not sure. Anyway, Hiyoko drugs the girl, and he's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And she's like, we need to call Terahara Jr. and see what he wants us to do with her. So Terahara Jr. is going to come over. So as in the book, he is waiting and seeing Terahara across the street. Terahara gets pushed into traffic. Suzuki follows the guy who pushed him to his home, and the same thing where he had been waiting outside the house, except in the movie, a kid rushes out and he's like, hey, mister, help us, there's a fire inside. And so Suzuki goes inside and he helps the wife put out this fire on the stove. And then again, he tells them he's a test prep instructor and just spends the day with the family, trying to figure out if this guy is or isn't the pusher. And in the movie, he has his phone turned off so that he won't talk to Hiyoko, whereas in the book, he had his phone turned on and Hiyoko kept calling, but he refused to tell her where he was. You know, he was trying to figure out if this really was the pusher because he was thrown off by the fact that he had a family. And so initially, he just wanted to figure out if it really was the pusher, but as time goes on, he is very touched by his experience with this family, and so he wants to protect them, and so that's why he's not telling Hiyoko. And then moving on to Cicada and Iwanishi. So in the book, we have a hitman named Cicada who works with a guy named Iwanishi. And Iwanishi is Cicada's handler, basically. Like, he finds the jobs and organizes them, and then Cicada goes out and does the hit. But when we meet Cicada, he's starting to feel resentful of Iwanishi, and he's like, man, like, I do all the work, and Iwanishi, like, he takes half the money, and he mistreats me, and he doesn't appreciate what I do, and he underestimates me. And so we see him doing one hit, and then he goes back to see Iwanishi, being like, okay, I'm done. And then right away, Iwanishi has another hit for him, and he's like, man, like, you're just taking advantage of me. Like, I just did a job. And so on his way to do this next job, he gets distracted because he sees these two guys beating up another guy, and so he gets involved. And he hears them asking about Suzuki and the pusher. And so he finds out that, you know, this man, Suzuki, is being looked for because, of course, Terahara has, like, told everybody to find Suzuki because Suzuki is their key to finding the pusher, because Terahara, of course, wants revenge for his dead son. Anyway, so this interaction causes Cicada to be late to his job, and he ends up not killing the guy he was supposed to kill. And so he's like, you know what? Who cares? I'm going to go find Suzuki and kill the pusher, and that way people will respect me, and I can leave Iwanishi, be my own person, do my own thing, and people, you know, will respect me and know me. And the person that Cicada was actually supposed to kill was another assassin called the Whale. So in the book, the Whale, he's an assassin, but he doesn't actually kill people. He just gets them to commit suicide. And he works specifically with politicians. And so, for example, the first job we see him on, he's getting a secretary to kill himself because the secretary works for this politician who did something shady. And so the way to fix this issue is the politician is going to have this secretary commit suicide, and then it detracts from what was going on, and it'll just fix his problems if this secretary dies. And so he gets the job done, but then the politician calls the Whale, and he's just like super nervous and paranoid, and he's like, is this really going to fix everything? Like, are you going to tell anybody? Like, is this going to work? And the Whale's like, yes, I've been doing this for 15 years. This will work. Like, calm down. I'm not going to talk. But of course, the politician is just very on edge, and so he hires Iwanishi to have Cicada kill the Whale. But because Cicada is late, the politician ends up being alone with the Whale as the politician is waiting for Cicada to show up, but he never does. And so the Whale realizes this is a setup, and so he ends up having the politician kill himself. And he finds out through this politician that the person that was supposed to kill him was like connected to Iwanishi, and so then he's going to go seek out Iwanishi. But with the Whale, we see that like he is haunted by the souls of those that he has had gotten to commit suicide. And he will see them one at a time in the book. And when one of them shows up, like he kind of blacks out and he can't see anything else around him. All he sees is the ghost. And I really love this aspect of the book. I thought it was it's unique to me. I don't know if I've heard of this before. And so just, this hitman that is plagued by the ghosts of the people he's had killed. I just really like that. And also the Whale in the book is homeless, which is kind of genius if you want a low profile, right? And so he lives in this homeless encampment, and there's another guy there who has this like sixth sense, and he can sense that the Whale is like plagued by these ghosts. And so he tells the whale, like, you need to clear your accounts and then you will be at peace and you can move on and these ghosts won't bother you anymore. And so the whale, he views clearing his accounts as just like tying up any loose ends. And he talks about how like years ago there had been a woman who it was his job to get her to kill herself, but then he didn't and he let her go. But then the next day the pusher killed her anyway. And so because of that, he thinks he needs to kill the pusher as a way to close up any loose ends in his life. And so this causes him to be on the looking for the pusher as well as everybody else. And so moving on to the movie, Cicada in the movie is called Simi, but he works for Iwanishi. That name is kept the same. And it's the same thing where Simi is the killer and Iwanishi is the one who finds the jobs. In the beginning, we see Simi on a job killing people, and the guy he is about to kill says something about Terahara. And so he goes to Iwanishi and he's like, who's Terahara? What's the deal with this? And so in the book, like I said, the whale was just working for politicians and Cicada was just doing random jobs. Whereas in the movie, it seems like everything comes back to Terahara. So the job Iwanishi had sent Simi on was related to Terahara in some way. And in the movie, we see that Simi and Iwanishi, like they have the bickering back and forth like they do in the book. But in the book, Cicada didn't like Iwanishi, whereas in the movie, even though they bicker, you can tell like deep down they do have a love for each other and they do have this bond. Like it was funny because in the book, Iwanishi is like proud of Cicada and admires him. And yet at the same time, like at some point he sets him up to potentially be killed. And so they just had an interesting relationship, like not much loyalty, even though Iwanishi admired Cicada. But in the book, Cicada just resented Iwanishi. Whereas in the movie, like I said, they might have bickered, but deep down they were loyal to each other. And so in the movie, Iwanishi is hired by Terahara to kill the whale. Because in the movie, the whale works for Terahara, but Terahara is worried that the whale knows too much. So he hires Iwanishi to get Simi to kill him. And by the way, in the movie, the whale is called Kujira. So Iwanishi goes out to scope out the job and he finds Kujira's RV, because in the movie, Kujira / the whale lives in an RV. And so he puts a tracker on the RV and then he tells Simi, like, just follow the tracker on your phone and go get that guy. But Kujira finds the tracker and so he leaves, but he leaves the tracker there. And so when Simi shows up, there's no one there. And so Kujira, he knows that Iwanishi put the tracker on his RV. And so through a connection, he finds out who Iwanishi is. He shows up at Iwanishi's apartment. He gets Iwanishi to jump out of a window and die. But before he does, he calls Simi and he tells Simi, like in code, that he has put a tracker on Kujira. And so now Simi knows to follow the tracker and he can find Kujira, who's about to kill Iwanishi. And to talk about Kujira, so in the movie, he also is like haunted by the ghosts. But in the movie, it's like all of them at once will like fill up his RV. And the one main ghost that he talks to is actually his dad, because we find out that Kujira was abused by his father and at age 15, he killed his dad. And this experience has caused him to have like this hollow-eyed look, which is talked about in the book as well. The whale has these eyes that just, when people look at him, they just think of like all the guilt and shame in their life. And so it makes them end up killing themselves, essentially. And so in the movie, we see why that is, whereas in the book, we never learned why. And the movie kind of has the whole clear your accounts thing, because it's like the ghost of his dad saying that. But that was definitely more of a thing in the book. And in the book, like I said, the whale is looking for Suzuki so that he can find the pusher, because the pusher killed that lady. Whereas in the movie, he is just wanting to find Cicada because Cicada and the Iwanishi connection. But in the book, sorry if this is confusing, but in the book, so Suzuki has this great visit with the pusher and he's very touched and he just has these memories of his wife who has died. And so his heart is softened. And then he gets a call from Hiyoko and she lies and says Terahara Jr. is still alive and she needs to see him. And so he's like, okay, fine, I'll go see you. And so he sees Hiyoko. Of course, she was lying. She drugs him. She takes him back to Terahara headquarters and they are going to like torture him to find out where the pusher is. But then Cicada shows up because remember, Cicada is looking for Suzuki so that he can find the pusher. And so Cicada like kills some of the people. Hiyoko lives though. And he takes Suzuki. And at first Suzuki thinks he's being rescued. But then he realizes he's not in a better position because the Cicada just wants him for the same thing, right? Just to find out where the pusher is. However, the whale, who thanks to Iwanishi, had been looking for Cicada, because Iwanishi told the whale where he could find Cicada. Like I said, there wasn't much loyalty there. He admired Cicada, and yet he also like wanted a show, and so he told the whale where Cicada was going. So the whale is hiding in the back of Cicada's car, and he grabs Cicada, and while the two of them are fighting, the pusher shows up and saves Suzuki, because the pusher had dropped Suzuki off at that coffee shop, saw him get drugged, saw him get taken to Terahara headquarters, and had followed him. So he takes Suzuki in his car, And Suzuki is like, hey, like your life is in danger, because throughout the whole day when they were spending the day together, neither of them confirmed who the other was. And so when he's in the car, he's like, hey, your wife and your kids are, they're looking for you guys because you killed Terahara Jr. And he found out that the pusher's son had picked up the phone when Hiyoko called and he had given him the address. And so he's like, you got to get out of there. Your life's at stake. But then the pusher reveals that the son actually gave a fake address and they're fine. And also that wife and son, 2 sons, they aren't his family at all. So the whole thing is that the wife and the 2 kids are part of this group called the Performers, and the Performers aren't killers, but they're involved in illegal activities, and they'd had it with Terahara, so they hired the pusher to kill Terahara's son, and then they knew people would be on the lookout for the pusher, so they set up this fake family for him and wanted the pusher to be followed, that way they could be in control of the situation, rather than trying to hide out and not be found. They allowed themselves to be found by Suzuki, basically. So he's like, you know what, it's fine. Hiyoko doesn't even know where we are. We gave a fake address. Everything's cool. Meanwhile, Cicada and the whale are fighting. The whale ends up killing Cicada. And then he finds Hiyoko, and Hiyoko is going to that fake address. And remember, the whale wants to get the pusher too. So he goes with Hiyoko to the fake address. They get there, realize it's a fake address. And the whale is like, maybe I can still find Cicada if I go back to the Terahara headquarters. He goes back there. Suzuki is there because he had left his wedding ring. So he returned to Terahara headquarters to get his wedding ring. He sees the whale there. The whale looks at him in his eyes, and as he looks at the whale in his eyes, he feels the guilt about working for this beauty company where the beauty products were addictive and ruined women's lives and ruined their health. And there was one woman in particular he had sold products to, and then a week later he had seen her and she was just a shell of the woman she had been. But he just shut off his emotions and was like, hey, I gotta do what I gotta do. I need to avenge my dead wife. But in this moment he feels the guilt and he's like, what have I become? This revenge has taken over, and my wife wouldn't want me harming these innocent people just to avenge her death. This isn't what she wanted. So why am I doing this? And he feels so much guilt. However, before he's able to harm himself, a bus drives by and the whale mysteriously falls in front of the bus and dies. So we can assume that the pusher was there protecting Suzuki and killed the whale. Meanwhile, remember those 2 people who were interested in the beauty products and were drugged? Hiyoko had taken them back to headquarters and they had escaped, and Terahara was there, and they end up killing Terahara. And we find out that these 2 are called the Hornet, and they're an assassin who wanted to get Terahara. I think they were connected to the Performers, so it was all this elaborate scheme. And that was why they were so gullible and so interested in the beauty products, is because they wanted an in into Terahara headquarters to get Terahara. And so that is basically the end of the book. So moving on to the movie. So in the movie, he's with the pusher's wife. Again, he's having a great time. He's remembering memories of his wife. And before he leaves, he tells the pusher hey, Terahara is after you because you killed their son. And then he leaves to go see Hiyoko. They drug him, take him back to headquarters. They torture him by having him watch footage from when his wife was run over. And in the footage, they see that the reason she was killed was because she was saving a small boy who was in the road. And while this is happening, Simi and Kujira show up. And so there's all this drama going on. And then you have the girl who was drugged, similar to the book, and she ends up killing Terahara. But with Simi and Kujira, the 2 of them end up fighting. And basically, Simi ends up pushing him and Kujira both out of a window and they both die. And then, meanwhile, that lady kills Terahara. Suzuki's knocked out, but then he wakes up and he leaves and he goes to the pusher's house and he sees it's empty. And then we flash forward a year and he's working at an amusement park as a clown, and the lady who had been pretending to be the pusher's wife and one of their sons walks up, and she basically tells him how it was this whole plan. They had hired the pusher to kill Terahara's son, and basically it was all a setup essentially for them to kill Terahara. And so he's like, well, why are you seeing me now? Why are you telling me this now? And she's like, it's because my son wanted to see you. We find out her son is the boy that his wife had saved when she was hit by the car. And so this final scene, he's finally able to get some closure, and he has this sweet moment hugging the son. And then after this, again, like I said, he gets closure about his wife's death and is able to go on living his life. So that is quite the overview of the plot. I hope it didn't get too confusing, but that is one of the reasons why I love Isaka's writing, is because it is very intricate and there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of reveals and twists and it keeps you on your toes. I love all the characters. They're also unique and interesting, and the relationships they have, like the Iwanishi cicada relationship, and then the whale being haunted by ghosts of like the people he's had killed. And then Suzuki, I loved his storyline. I'm a sucker for stories about people who are seeking revenge, and on their way to getting that revenge, they realize that their revenge like is ruining who they are, and that the person they're avenging wouldn't have wanted them to be doing this, right? And so that moment in the book where he's realizing like, this isn't what my wife would want. Great moment. And I absolutely loved it. And it wasn't in the movie. Like the scene in the movie at the end was touching, but it wasn't as impactful as the ending of the book, in my opinion. And I want to talk about the book title. So the American title is Three Assassins, which is fine. I don't love it, but it's fine. The Japanese title is Grasshopper, which also may not be like super grabbing, but it does like make you think more, because in the book, people are often referred to as insects, not just their code names. Obviously we have cicada, but also just in general, like how people are like insects. And the pusher talks to Suzuki and he says how grasshoppers, when they're on their own, they're just very peaceful and they're living their peaceful lives. And yet when they get in a big group, grasshoppers become locusts, and locusts just like get together and wreak havoc. And so he says people, when there's too many people together, they turn into locusts and they just destroy things, essentially. And so, Suzuki can be seen as the grasshopper because he is still peaceful and just trying to do his thing. Whereas like all the assassins view themselves and others as locusts. And that is why they do what they do, is because they have this locust mentality, whereas Suzuki has like the grasshopper mentality, I guess you could say. And to talk about like the Bullet Train tie-ins while keeping this Bullet Train spoiler free. In Bullet Train, the book, we have Suzuki who is on his way to see his wife's parents. And he tells us in Bullet Train how his wife had died years ago, and yet he still wasn't emotionally ready to see her parents, but now he is. So this trip is very significant. And throughout the book, Bullet Train, he is interacting with all the different characters and just has different words of wisdom for them. And we also have a scene where they talk about Suzuki has that hollow-eyed look that the whale had. And so because of Suzuki's trauma and the experiences he had, he now like can get those hollow eyes, I guess, which kind of like, bring a sense of like guilt and darkness in a sense to those who see them. But the whale is also referenced in Bullet Train because the whale like mysteriously disappeared. So in Bullet Train, we see how different hitmen are like speculating on what happened to him. And then the pusher is actually a key character in Bullet Train. So I won't say like why he's important, but he does appear in Bullet Train yet again. And then the Hornet is also talked about in Bullet Train because they reference how the Hornet killed Terahara, and that made way for this new crime boss, Minagishi. And for book versus movie, so this movie was fine. Like I enjoyed it well enough. It is free to watch on YouTube. So like it wasn't a waste of my time by any means, and it was entertaining. And it wasn't a bad adaptation, but overall I do prefer the book. The book wins. I just enjoyed the overall story more in the book. Like the showdown is definitely condensed in the movie, so I did enjoy just like all the twists and turns at the end of the book. And again, I liked the showdown between the whale and Suzuki in that final moment. And Suzuki and Kujira like never interact in the movie. Although I do want to say at the end of the movie, we see the ghost of Kujira and Simi hanging out. And I thought that was a cool ending where the two of them are dead, but their ghosts are continuing on. Which again, I like in the book how like after Iwanishi dies, we quickly see him appear as a ghost to the whale, and then Cicada dies, and he reappears again as a ghost too, and so that was just a really fun element. But I also prefer the memories of Suzuki and his wife in the book. Like, for example, one reason he went back to headquarters to get his ring is because he always makes sure he has his wedding ring, because his wife, when she was alive, she was worried that whenever she died, she would be forgotten. And so he tells her, like, this ring ensures that I will never forget you. And so now that he is dead, he like has to have that ring on him to show to, his wife who has passed on that he will never forget her. And there's like sweet flashbacks of him and his wife in the movie, but yeah, I just preferred it in the book. So basically in the end, like I said, the book wins. I would highly recommend this. If you like Bullet Train, you should definitely check this one out. It's a quick read too. It's definitely, I think it's under 300 pages possibly, whereas Bullet Train is over 400. So it's considerably shorter, but it has that same vibe to it. Yeah, I gave Bullet Train 5 stars. Three Assassins got 4, but definitely would recommend. And the movie was good. I didn't love it, and I don't think I would watch it again, whereas I definitely would read the book again. But if you like Bullet Train, and if you read the Three Assassins, then I think the movie Grasshopper is worth checking out. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know down below in the comments if you have read this book or seen this movie, and if you found the Bullet Train tie-ins interesting. And yeah, I will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do give my podcast a rating and review. Bye.